Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Mind Blown Zone. This one is called What Causes COVID, Colds, Flus, and Fevers. Here's the intro. Those aware that viruses don't exist have had difficulty explaining the actual cause of so-called viral diseases due to their materialist thinking. Unable to provide a viable alternative explanation, they lack credibility with the establishment experts and their followers for this singular reason. Building on our podcasts about the primary cause of disease, today we offer our explanations for the many causes of COVID, as well as discussing the causes of colds, flus, and fevers. How you doing, Brad? I bet you're excited about this one.
Never better as usual. And yeah, I'm going to really enjoy getting this one off my chest. As hard as it's going to be to accept for many, it's good to get it out there, no doubt. And this will be fun for you too. I don't know if you've heard all of this stuff from me before.
Probably not all of it.
Maybe.
It seems like the path we're going to take here is first establish some common beliefs and understandings of COVID to just be clear on what the territory is that we're dealing with here, and then move on to our argument against that. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I'm going to actually open up with colds, flus, and fevers, just because they're part of COVID was people who had those things. But, we're told that they had COVID because everybody had COVID in 2020, 21, and 2022, right? So I'm going to start with those.
Okay.
And
take it away then.
Ease our way into COVID. So hopefully it'll make sense the way I've set this up. But the goal of this is obviously talk about COVID, but obviously offer some explanations for commonly held viral diseases so that people can start to get a sense of what could be another possibility, which I promised at the end of the disease podcast. So here we go. Colds, flus, and fevers. So, obviously the alternative to the establishment medical system, I think they like to call themselves terrain theorists, sometimes naturopaths, but they all seem to come to this conclusion that the cause of the colds and flus, which seem to happen, in the fall, winter periods, seasonal, they call it seasonal detoxing. So they seem to have this notion that we build up all these toxins, in the spring and the summertime and, maybe the early fall, and we're able to slough them off because we're outdoors, we're getting sunshine, we're touching the feet on the ground, we're swimming in lakes and oceans, and that's enabling our body to release the toxins. But as soon as we lose our connection to nature, because it gets cold, we don't go outside anymore, et cetera, then these toxins build up in us, and that's why we get colds and flu. So that's their explanation. That's a reasonable explanation, but does that make sense?
Well, it's reasonable, but there's a lot of people who don't get colds in spring.
Right. So there's a lot of problems with it too.
What, they're not building up the toxins?
Exactly. That's, how do we, relate to the people who, don't go out at all into the outdoors and never get cold and flus, or people that, that don't, do get out, but then they never get colds and flus. So that their explanation is problematic in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an explanation for something, it's meant to work. It's meant to be consistent. It's not meant to be like, well, it doesn't really explain that, but genetics,
right?
It's not meant to fall apart like that.
I got a side bet with someone to see how long it was going to take you to bring up genes. So we didn't even make it in 3 minutes. Well done.
Who won? Did you win?
Yeah, I won. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, that is their explanation. So your choices are, viruses or seasonal detoxing as the two leading explanations. So of course, I'm going to bring up GNM, GHK, and Dr. Hammer. And of course, what he has to say makes a lot more sense. And what he suggested is that everything that strikes the nasal, laryngeal, bronchial, and lung regions of our body all revolve around the theme of fear. And of course, when I say fear, we mean, worry, concerns, scares, frights, right? It isn't abject horror. A lot of times when we use that word, got to keep making that clear. And the basic idea here, and we'll start with the common cold. and he would call this a stink or a scent conflict. Now, it doesn't really, the German doesn't translate to English that well, so I've got a bit of a problem with this idea of a stink conflict, but a scent conflict makes a little more sense. And what he was implying was that you're sensing danger of some sort, and that could just very simply be, I have to be careful in the wintertime because I might catch a cold or a flu, right? If I don't wash my hands and use antibacterial soap and clean my counters and whatever else people do, thinking that's going to help them avoid it. But it's just that thought, I could be in a dangerous space here, that the psyche translates that as you need to be able to smell better or sense better with your nose, which is actually our primary sense, believe it or not. That's our first cranial nerve, the olfactory. Anyway, when that psyche registers this idea that you're concerned or worried that you may be in the presence of danger, but you're not sure, it actually widens your nasal passages, the nasal mucosa, the laryngeal mucosa, and the bronchial mucosa. And so that's actually necrotizing some of that tissue while you're concerned, worried about potentially getting a cold or a flu. Making sense so far?
So just say you've got a tube, right? And when you say it's necrotizing, what you mean, it's removing the inner layers of the tube to widen it.
Yeah, or I would say I guess outer layers, the way I would say it. But I can see you're saying inner being the nearest to the opening, if you want to say it that way. But yeah, it's sloughing off some of the tissue that's, in the way of your being able to smell well effectively.
Okay.
That's the cold. The flu, it drops deeper. The deeper the fear we go, it does the same thing down in the bronchial tubes. So there isn't a tremendous difference, right? You would just see a flu would be a deeper, longer concern, annoyance, scent conflict, effectively. And flus, by the way, I'm going to talk about them in a second. There's a whole bunch of different things that people just call the flu. But that's it. You're sensing danger of some sort. And that danger very well could be it's flu season or it's cold season. I need to be careful when I go to my friend's house because she gets sick all the time, or I need to wash my hands after I go to the grocery store or whatever, right? These are the kind of actions where you're signaling to your psyche that you're worried. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And you've kind of mentioned, the first phase where the body's making some adjustment due to some sensing of danger. But I imagine people are confused, like, well, what's the flu about that? Where do the symptoms come in? Right. And I think that's what happens after, yeah.
Yeah, you're perfectly fine the whole time you're sensing danger. That's the conflict active stage of ectodermal tissue, is there's no symptoms. So you always get the cold or the flu a day, 2, 3, 4, 5 days after you were worried. And that's the moment when your psyche says, okay, he senses he's out of danger now. I'm going to return that nasal mucosa or bronchial mucosa back to the way it was. And that's when your temperature goes up. So you get a little fevery, and that signals the bacteria to activate. And that signals the body and inflammation happens, and fluid is built up in order to perform the quote unquote healing of that particular tissue.
So it seems like you're suggesting that, okay, spring rolls around, or what is signaling the danger? Here's my two questions. What signals the danger that causes people to go into this conflict active? Seasonally, because it seems like you're trying to relate this to like a explanation of seasonal things as well, right? What signals the danger, and then what relieves the danger? What makes people go, oh no, everything is okay?
It's the person's thoughts. The answer to both of those questions is the person's thinking.
And why do people have that thinking seasonally? It seems that there's some seasonal cues.
That's what we've been taught.
You first suggested, it comes around, you're like, oh no, it's flu season, right?
Right.
Oh no,
right.
I might get sick, right?
Right.
Okay, fine. And then what about the next part? What makes them go, oh no, everything is okay?
Typically, right, they'll find themselves in a situation that they feel uncomfortable in, of some sort, right? Maybe they go spend the weekend with their friends, or they go off to a getaway, a vacation, who knows whether, but they're outside of their, carefully curated comfort zone of how they disinfect their home and their food and their house and so forth.
Okay.
That'd be one example.
Like they forget about it for some reason. Like
right.
Just as soon as you like just feel happy and like everything's okay, you just get distracted. Right. You're like, hey, everything's cool. Oh, I'm getting sick.
That's it. Or someone at work nearby starts sneezing and wheezing and coughing, and they get frustrated. Oh, Jim shouldn't have come into work if he's that sick, and he's going to spread it around the office now. And oh my God, I got to be careful, right? This is the worry, concern, thought pattern that people fire up. And lo and behold, if Jim stops by and sneezes in their cubicle or whatever, right? I mean, that can set off all kinds of alarm bells for him, right? And so this is, and it could be a lot of other things. I'm just this is one example, right? You could sense danger of anything. It could be, you're afraid that, you're going to lose your job, or your house is going to get blown away by a tornado, or a million different things. But I'm just saying this seems to be, I would guess, a common thing that happens during this quote unquote cold and flu season.
Sure. I think what's interesting for me there is I was always wondering like what helps people come to the logical conclusion that they don't need to be afraid anymore of getting the cold or flu. But you're just suggesting that, or they just forget about it and just have some good time somewhere and just feel okay. And biologically, they're just like, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah, they'll sense that they're out of the way of danger at some point. Right? Oh, okay. I'm no longer at work. Oh, I'm back home after my weekend getaway, or whatever the thing was they were concerned about.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay.
And likewise with all of this, of course, is a family member that gets sick right now. It's in the house with them, right? There's no way to get away from it. So this is how you catch colds and flus from your family members.
Okay, well, how about this? Because in my past, where I believed in this stuff about getting sick from contagions, like it would be like someone else in my family gets sick, and then I'm like, oh no, they're sick, I'm gonna get sick, and then I'm like watching myself very closely, and then like, do I feel something? Oh yeah, I feel it. Oh yeah, it's getting worse, and then it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, I am getting sick, and I just fall into sickness. It at the same time that they've been in the house with me at the same time. And I don't recall, or I never noticed some period where I was like, oh, everything's fine. I just fell into sickness while being around that person the whole time.
Right. So you may just have had a period of a day's worth of, concern or worry, and you kind of forgot about it and went about your business, or, you weren't hyper focused on it. So you relaxed.
Yeah.
And that as soon as you relax your concern, the healing process kicks in.
It could even be like when you just go to sleep, right? You just like phasing out, being hyperactive consciousness, going into that like partial consciousness, and the fear goes away, and boom, that's all it takes. You just wake up 2 hours after you fall asleep, and you're like, oh, I got a tickle in my throat, right?
Yeah. It's hard to sleep when you're conflict active. So you obviously weren't conflict active if you got a good night's sleep.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right then.
It's like a seemingly minor worry, and obviously you get most of the time a cold is just a minor nuisance for most people, right? Even some flus are a minor nuisance. And speaking of which, we'll dive right into those. There's so many different types of flus, right? It's 24-hour, 48-hour, 72-hour, bird flu, swine flu, stomach flu. There's all different kinds of things that are allegedly come with different symptoms or different durations. And I think you'll find it interesting that most people who like catch the flu off of each other in the house, they don't have the same stuff. Right? It's always a little different, which to me, that's always a red flag that this isn't a virus. How could it be? Then it's just giving people totally different symptoms. And of course, right, you've got the mucus and the snot and the phlegm and the stuffed up nose and the cough and the bronchioles, and those are all related to the fear-based stuff, right? but then, you get into like swine flu and stomach flu and things like that. This is down below, right? This is down in your stomach and your bowels.
Right. Well, you might
So
be angry at the person for giving you this flu. Yeah.
that could be, that's perfectly reasonable, because that's what hits the stomach, abdominal region, and bowel region is anger.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. So some people have the flu just up in the lung and nasal region, and some people get it there and below, or just below. So there's an interesting mix there. But obviously, there's the GNM, Dr. Hummer explanations make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to fevers. If there are no more questions, I'll keep moving right along. And
Please
so
proceed.
I think a lot of people call fevers flus, right? As soon as their temperature goes up, they got the flu. We get this, and we're going to do a bunch more podcasts on different viruses, so-called viruses, and you'll be amazed at how many of the symptoms of all these different things through history, it's always flu-like symptoms. And really, flu-like symptoms are more like fever-like symptoms. And fever happens every time you go from a conflict active stage into a healing stage. So you could have had 1,000 different conflicts. We could spend the rest of our lives talking about them all. But when you get over those conflicts, the healing phase starts you off in a fever. And depending on the duration and intensity of your conflict, it's more energy draining. It's more, you're not hungry. You lose your appetite. You can't get out of bed, right? People call these things flu. And really, you're just entering into a healing phase after resolving a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that is, right? You're basically, your psyche says, all right, we need to get you back to where you were now. So now that you're over your conflict, so I need to rally all your resources for the next 24, 48, 72 hours. And we're going to do everything we can to get you back to where you were as fast as we can. So we're not going to put you into a 3-month healing phase. We're going to put you into a 3-day healing phase. So we don't want you eating. We don't want you running around. We don't want you doing activities. So we're going to suck all this energy away from you and dedicate it all to, repairing this tissue that was temporarily changed. That makes sense?
Yes.
So that's often called the flu. So you can see that the flu just covers so many different things that you can't call it this one thing. Like it was a 100%, a scare worry conflict. And this is the end result. It could very well be resolved from hundreds of different conflicts. That's just what the healing phase looks like. Makes sense?
You reckon if you just had for example, you just had a rough few months with everything going wrong, like say you're having arguments in your relationship, your money went down, you just, I don't know, whatever, just a whole shitty few months, right? And then things start to pick up. You might then get this fever, a bunch of conflicts just all start to resolve. And then you're just, boom, you're in bed going, ugh, with a massive fever.
Yeah, when you have a bigger conflict load, you're more likely to be just completely knocked off your feet.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't want to do anything, right? You just want to rest and sleep all day. Right. And what you're describing, right, if you're resolving multiple conflicts, my belief is that you're going in it, you're resolving one when you get hot, and then you cool back down again, and you get the chills, and then you resolve another one, so you heat up again. So that, that hot cold thing that happens in flu sometimes could very well be. And you gave a great example of how you could have multiple conflicts. You could catch the flu from your, housemate, partner, spouse, child, whatever, and also be angry at them. And so that would give you the 2 different conflicts you resolved there, right? The scare conflict and the anger conflict.
Did you suggest that the chills part, what were you saying about the chills? How did that relate?
Your body, your psyche heats up your body temperature when it activates bacteria, which is part of the healing process. Bacteria are instrumental in the restoration process, whether they're repairing, restoring, or removing tissue. So that's what basically calls them into just you're going back down to your normal body temperature, right?
And
that
feels
if you
like
say
back down to normal, Well, like, does that really make sense to say that going back to normal feels like the chills?
It can, yeah. But it could also just be that's the way that the healing phase is working. They heated it up to get up the bacteria working, and for some reason it needed to lower it back down again. But I think the flu that is more indicative of a flu is the chills than just a fever.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anyway, variety of different things can happen there. It's difficult to just pin it right. That's so much easier to say. Yeah, it's the influenza A virus, man. That's the easy way out.
This exactly identical replicated virus causes all the symptoms
right.
in different ways.
That's nobody wanted to listen to our victim mentality podcast so far, so maybe that's everyone's avoiding that. But yeah, you're a victim there, so that's easier. It's not yet. So anyway, that's a fever, which a lot of people call a flu, and vice versa. So moving right along, we're getting in. Let's get into the COVID stuff a little bit here. So I just kind of had some miscellaneous facts I wanted to talk about here. So this PCR test thing, we hear Carrie Mullis talk about how you shouldn't use them to diagnose disease, and you can find anything in anybody, blah, 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 blah. So first of all, there's no getting into COVID now. There was never a gold standard test, right? Like this one, no matter what, this person has COVID when fill in the blank. Like there's no such thing. There never was. So the idea that you could come up with a false positive ratio or anything is impossible without a gold standard test. Make sense?
Sure.
Right. It's like the example I always hear given is like a pregnancy test, right? Like you can determine the efficacy of your pregnancy test based on whether the woman had a baby or not, right? So like, all right, we had 100 women who had babies, and we used our pregnancy test, and 98 of them tested positive. So the accuracy of our pregnancy test is 98% because of a gold standard. A baby pops out 9 months later, right? That's a gold standard. So we've never had that for COVID or any other PCR related testing. And even Fauci even said that he's on tape saying, in the mid 2000s, that if you run the PCR cycles over 30 times, which means you keep replicating the sample, eventually it's meaningless because it's going to give you a positive no matter what. And, obviously there are plenty of people that said they were running these in these, lab testing 40 and 45 cycles for the samples that were given for people who, came in for a COVID test. And, my favorites were the stories of the people who showed up at the clinic to get a COVID test and decided they, couldn't wait around in line any longer. So they left, and like a week later, they got a postcard in the mail saying they tested positive. Oh, that was one of my favorite stories. Ridiculous, awful as it is. But it was pretty clear.
PCR test bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. And like I said, the guy who invented it, Carrie Mullis, was saying so, for 20, 30 years before the COVID PCR test came out. It should never be used.
I mean, isn't the test like, isn't the test like if you're looking for a string of letters or something like that, like a specific arrangement of letters, and then you're like, if I find this bunch of letters, that it represents a code in amongst this, then it's positive. And then where each time you cycle it, that's like increasing like you're trying to like pull random letters out of a bowl, or you just keep putting more letters in, double it. Eventually you're gonna be able to find that string of letters in the
exactly
bowl,
right? That's exactly right.
Not the best example there.
It's a great example. And they actually put a primer into the PCR test sample. So they prime it with, some RNA in addition to the sample that you provided, right, from your cranial scrape. It's just, the whole thing is dirty from beginning to end. And, just none of it makes any sense. But yeah, they're just testing for RNA. When you kept saying letters, yeah, they're testing for RNA. And RNA is the same for every living organism on the planet. There's no difference. It's just the arrangement of those letters that determine the difference between a piece of corn and a human being, for example. So
I even think where a lot of people are at with PCR tests is they think that it actually finds a virus. So they have so far removed from the reality of what this thing
Right.
is, that they think that it actually goes and uh looks at it and like puts things under microscopes or something and analyzes it and goes, oh yeah, there's a virus, like, and
Yep.
think that they literally find viruses. I mean, that's so different from what's happening.
Right. That's the impression we're left with, right? And the fact that nobody can ever find a virus in the bodily fluids or tissues of anybody is shuts that argument down all the more, right? No one's ever been able to achieve such a feat. So
Right.
obviously the PCR test isn't doing such a thing.
Right. So I think step one is to, like, just say you test positive for COVID. That doesn't objectively mean that you have a virus or anything like that. It doesn't mean that. It means that a test was done in a particular way and it does some stuff, and it returned a positive result.
It means less than that. It means absolutely nothing. It always
Right.
did mean nothing. I mean, there were people that thought they had it that went and got it and didn't test positive, right? There are people that
Right.
swore up and down they didn't have it, but they got tested positive, so they had to, quarantine and leave the office. And hey, there's every possible outcome under the sun happened, but of course, nobody in the media would ever lead us to believe that anything was wrong with any of that. It's basically 100% nonsense. It's all I wanted to get out of there. We ended up spending a lot of time on that section.
Okay.
All
What's
nonsense.
next?
It's 100% wrong. That's the short version of that bullet point. It's all wrong, no matter no matter if you were sick and you tested positive, or you weren't sick and you tested positive or negative, or none of it matters. It's all wrong. It was basically a coin flip. All right, so there's a woman named Christine Massey, and I think she just took this upon herself. She was a researcher, and somebody who was in the community questioning things, and she ended up sending out a FOIA request all around the world. FOIA's Freedom of Information Act, meaning that government agencies are required to respond to a FOIA request and give the public answers to their queries. And she ended up just basically asking. She asked a bunch of different ways, just so there couldn't be any finagling around it. But she wanted to know which, the CDC, the NIH, the California State Health Agency, the Canadian Health Agency, all over the world, Australia, Canada, England, everywhere, asking them, do you have in your labs a sample of the SARS-CoV-2 virus? And 100% response rate, none of them had a sample of it. So, last I checked, she had done like 210 or 220 requests, and all of them came back, no, we don't have a sample. It's at the CDC or it's at the World Health Organization. But she would FOIA request them, and they would say they didn't have a sample. So nobody admitted they had a sample of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. That should strike listeners as highly interesting, in my opinion.
Because
apparently nobody's got it.
How easy it would be to have it, right? Like, yeah, ask any virologist. They're like, oh yes, 100%. Yes, we can isolate. This has been done since the 50s. So like, okay, so yeah, you got one? You got a sample for me? Well, no, we don't have it. Some other experts, they've done it. And you go to those experts and they're like, oh, no. Those people over there, they have it, but certainly they have it. It's like, can anyone give it to me? Like, no.
That was the results. And some rich guy in Europe somewhere had like a 1.5 million euro prize for anyone who could give him a sample of the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
And you should be able to walk up to the table, seeing as this thing's all around the world, wipe up to it, swipe it, get the virus, and be like, here's can it give me $1.5 million, right?
Yeah, right. Like how many nurses could have just gotten some snotty rags from their patients in their COVID ward, and right, it's got to be in here somewhere. Here's a big thing of nasty fluids from sick people, so it's in here. No, right. Nobody ever claimed it. So, just more and more examples of how big a farce this thing was. Anyway, so moving along. So I always strikes me as interesting is that I recall very vividly, I've talked about this in previous podcasts, the early symptoms of COVID. They were, when it was coming out of China and Wuhan. Right? I was in San Francisco airport in, like the beginning of February 2020. And it's just started to get around, and it was hypoxia and a dry cough. For those of you who don't know what hypoxia means, it means low blood oxygen. Basically, you're having a hard time breathing, which I can imagine would be very scary. And that was it for about the first 6 months. after it started to hit us, March, April, May, June. And I remember a lot of doctors saying that this, when they looked at people that came into ERs, right, it looked like altitude sickness to them. So it was some interesting symptomology that by the time summer rolled around, that was both of those symptoms were off the list. You don't hear people talk about those much anymore. I'm not saying nobody ever had those symptoms again. All of a sudden, it became this loss of sense of taste and smell. And that's been that way since, mid to late 2020 to date. That's the hallmark symptom that you've allegedly gotten COVID. So it's interesting, right? That would be that the symptoms would change that much. The only symptom that, in my estimation, just from talking to people that I know, the only thing that everybody had in common was that they felt their energy was drained. Right? They just like, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do anything for a day, 2 days, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. Some people, months they had this. So, but that's, as I mentioned earlier, that's a sign that, there's some sort of conflict being resolved. And that's the reason for the energy drain. It has nothing to do with a specific disease. It's common to all healing
that
phases.
is such a vague symptom.
Right? But it's the only one that's common. Like everyone agreed that at least for a day or two, they felt knocked down. So
yeah, I remember asking people, did you have, what did you have, like flu symptoms? And they're like, no, with my COVID, I just had low energy. I'm like,
yeah,
what are you even talking about then? Why are you saying, no, I got a test. I'm like, okay, you got the test.
Right.
I'm pretty sure with that test, if you have like just mucus, like that test, I'm sure if you put mucus in it, you get positive. If you don't put mucus in it, like
apoptosis.
If you sniff, you go, and just clear your passageways before they put those thing in, you test negative. I did like about 20 plus tests and I never tested positive for it. Just drink some water, clear my nose, and I never tested positive.
Yeah. Well, you're a pretty healthy guy, so I think. And
I just, if I can add, please, I didn't do them because I was like, oh, do I have COVID? It was because I was traveling.
Right. Yeah. So moving right along here. So let's get to the big question of the day: is like, what caused COVID-19? So I've got a few things I got to cut through here before I get to my reveal here, which is going to be perhaps quite surprising to a lot of people, but it's got to get out there one way or the other. So I want to start with the terrain theorists again, because they really haven't, put any causes out there that can get any support. A lot of them have said it was just a bad flu season. And I think that really rubs a lot of people the wrong way, because some people had something different, right? Like they say, I've had many flus, many colds, and it was nothing like this. So just talk about losing all your points on, arguing about viruses. That's just out the window when you say it was just a bad flu season. There was nothing else to it. There's something else happened. And I agree that something else happened. Some of us suggested it was 5G radiation. And it's an interesting theory to follow. Allegedly, Wuhan was the first city in the world to roll out 5G towers all over the city. And allegedly, this Codogno, Italy, was also a place where they were rolling out 5G, the first place in Europe. And these are the two places where allegedly these big breakouts happen. And I think they both have some bad air pollution problems too. So kind of convenient that that's the case, but there was, people have pointed some fingers at 5G, and it would make a little bit of sense if they were just, those are the only places people got sick. But the fact that people obviously got sick all around the world in every possible environment you can imagine kind of wipes that one off the map pretty quickly. Yeah.
Sure. It's interesting. Just going back to your flus thing at the beginning, when you feel some sense danger, right? Like you could get it in your head, like, oh, that 5G tape thing. I don't think that's good. That's really strong radiation. And that could really make me sick. Like I'm a bit worried about that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who think along those lines, and I've had conversations with them, online and forums and so forth, and I've listened to them and watched them, and a lot of them will get sick after they go on vacations, right? Which is interesting, right? Because they've stepped out of their carefully curated control environment that they have at home. and they had to eat food in restaurants, and they had to fly on airplanes, and they had to touch this and drink unpurified water and not eat the organic food and all those things, right? Then they add that up to some danger, right? Some problems. And that's what they think they got sick because they didn't have their perfect water and food and air and no Wi-Fi and all the rest. But I think what's really the problem was is they were worried about all these things when they travel. So interesting thoughts. So what else do we have here? The seasonal flu detox thing. Yeah, that really did not fly well at all. Terrible explanation. Really frustrating to the general public, I think, because something different did happen. We'll talk about that in a second. So I want to talk a little bit about people who say or believe they had COVID, in quotes, right? So I'm just, approximating here, but I'd say, roughly 5% of people out there, if you ask them if they had COVID and they say yes without any more information from them, these are people that actually tested positive, but never had any symptoms. But they still said they had it, right? If you just look for a yes or no question, right? Then this is where this term asymptomatic carrier was first introduced in 2020, right? These were the asymptomatic carriers out there. So I've talked to, 5 or 6 people who will tell me that, right? Never had it, but tested positive for it. So that's a percentage of people.
Never seeing nanoscopic entities and insisting that you have them.
Sure. That's what everybody's doing. I did that most of my life, and so did you, right? You have to admit it.
Yeah.
Right. I had, strep throat 5,000 times as a kid. And, I don't think I really had too many. I think I had the flu once when I was a really young boy. But I don't remember getting it as an adult. But yeah, no, I mean, whenever I got sick, I'm like, oh yeah, I got the bug, right? He's got a bug. So we've all done it. That's the brainwashing that we got. All right. So I say I give 5% to these asymptomatic positive tests, no symptom people. I give roughly a 10% to people who had a mild COVID, right? So for them, they would say it wasn't much different than a cold, right? I just didn't have a lot of energy for a couple of days. My head was stuffed up. I had some mucus, blah, blah, blah. But, roughly 10% of people, I think, will give you that kind of an answer. It wasn't that bad. And then I give 15% ballpark. Again, I'm just making these numbers up. It is just from people I've listened to and talked to over the years. I think had more moderate to major flu-like symptoms, really, right? And maybe even pneumonia. I know 2 or 3 people that were told they had pneumonia and ended up taking antibiotics after having it, having quote COVID for a week or 2. But it wasn't a mild cold or a mild flu. It was, something that really knocked them over for a decent period of time. And I think they really did just have scare-based flu-like symptoms. And then that scare-based stuff can lead to pneumonia. Talked about that a few times, but that's an abandonment or existence conflict. So these are my rough numbers. Again, I think there's any need to be absolutely precise here, but I think this is a fair treatment so far. And then 20%, I think these are the people who had multiple comorbidities. And basically, I'm saying elderly people here. A big chunk of the people who quote unquote got COVID. And they had 5+. I remember seeing this at the end of 2020, talking to a few people because I was like, I told you. The average age of people who died of COVID was 75 at the end of 2020. And the number of comorbidities on average that people had was 5. Think about that for a second, right? Being over 70 is a comorbidity, but even so, they had 4 more health-related issues. And so these are the people that basically were the ones who, had the bad COVID. Right. So what I'm trying to get at here is, they just really had their existing diseases exacerbated by the wave of fright and fear and panic that was going on all around them. Especially when they went to the hospitals, right? They went to the hospital, their heart problem or their kidney problem or lung or liver. Of course, the first thing they do before they get any of that checked out is they get a COVID test, right? And as soon as they get the COVID test and they get the positive, everybody flips out, scares the dickens out of the person. And it's just, it's just straight down the fear hellhole from there. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
right? They send them to the ICU, they lock them up, no one will touch them. And, it's all, everybody's just frightened beyond belief at that point. So those people were the least likely to take that news and information well. And they put them on ventilators, remdesivir, and the whole 9 yards, right? So
Right.
that
So
accounts
if
for
you're on
what
a
I,
ventilator, if I can just add, please. Like if you're
yeah,
on a ventilator, like people are saying like ventilator causes problems, but like it's just putting oxygen into your body, right?
no,
But
no,
like,
no, no,
oh, it's not.
no, wrong. No, no. No, they have to put you into an induced coma and
Really?
stop your lungs from breathing. Yeah, like that's why 90% of the
Are
people
you
that went on
serious?
ventilators died. Yeah.
Okay. Oh my god.
Yeah, they have to basically
That's
stop
ridiculous.
your natural breathing from happening so that they can give you the mechanical breathing.
Okay, I shouldn't have weighed in there at all. I didn't even know that. I
Yeah.
was gonna say is that you would be really scared if you were on a if you're on some machine. But imagine how scared you would be if you were in a induced coma. Like,
No,
God.
yeah. Chemically induced coma. Yeah, it's horrific. It was horrific, but we're not going to go there today.
All right. Okay.
So, so that leaves 50%, by the way. So I just accounted for half of the people who thought they had COVID fell into one of those categories. And the other half had COVID, not a viral disease, but had what I'm about to talk about here. So how I'm going to refer to this is that these people experienced a cleansing, a releasing of latent repressed trauma that was being stored in their bodies. Any questions about that?
I'm ready to hear.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So I'll get to the full on of that here in just a little bit. So I think I got to that C. I'm going to jump over that. So there's a couple things I need to talk about before I fully elucidate that point, right? There's a guy named Rupert Sheldrake. Have you heard of Rupert Sheldrake, by the way? I don't know if you have.
Yes, I have.
Okay. He's kind of he's kind of a thorn in the side of the scientism academic community, right? I think he's famous for putting a TED talk out there about how our modern scientists aren't really scientists at all because they, look away from anything that goes against the dogma. And interesting guy, but I just want to talk about his morphic resonance. I think it's an important, concept. And really, it's the resonance idea. But effectively, what he's saying is that in short, there's like a template for everything, and we'll call it an ethereal or an etheric or a spiritual template. So there's a template for a human being, and there's a template for a daisy flower, and a template for a mosquito, and so forth. So you follow that?
Okay.
There's this template out there, and this template is what we all get, printed out of, in effect. Right? Our bodies come from this morphic template, and the word resonance, of course, is important because we all have to resonate with that template. There's a basic human template. We all resonate with it to be existing in the present place that we're existing in. So the really interesting thing about Sheldrake's, some of his more famous things, he's done some really neat experiments. One of them's with dogs that know when their owners are coming home, and they go to all these lengths to try to trick the dog. But the dog, like when there's a real close bond between the owner and the dog knows when their owner's coming home, and they'll film the dog and film the guy and make him drive twice as far or go away twice as long or 5 times as long and as he normally goes, and they got the camera on the dog all day, and the dog will know, like when he's within like 5 minutes of the home, the dog will jump up and start wagging his tail and go to the front door and all this stuff. So it's really neat, some of these experiments. But he's also done another one where people can sense when someone's looking at them behind them, like looking at the back of their head, and some pretty definitive research on those. And, it's pretty hard to deny the results and a lot of different experimenters have tried it, and they've all kind of got the same results. That's interesting. I think his most famous thing is what he does with crystals, where someone will invent, or create a new crystal, like a new chemical compound of a crystal. And and then they'll tell their partners around the world about it, and they'll make the compound, and so that here's how you formulate this new type of crystal. And so a guy in America will tell a guy in Australia, and the guy in Australia will make it in his lab. Then the guy in America will change something about his crystal, and before he even has time to call his buddy in Australia and tell him about the change, the Australian crystal will change in the same way that the American crystal has changed. Right? So they're connected in some other way, right? You follow?
I mean, I follow. I mean, I'd have to
It's like
see this. I mean, sure.
This is the spooky action at a distance thing, kind of from Einstein, right? Where they can't count for how this thing on one side of the universe and this thing on the other side can. Right? That's where they arrived at the idea that information, information travels faster than light, kind of a thing, right? So anyway, this is his idea. So I think it's a good idea. I think the resonance idea is that we all resonate with this template. So what I'm going to argue here in a little bit is that this template has been upgraded, and we all.
So if I can say back to you what you're saying about this template to see if we're on the same page, right? So you're saying that there's like in the same way that a crystal has like some template of how, almost like its nature, almost how it's meant to be, or something like that. And if it changes or something, then there's like some disturbance in the template force running through the universe or something, and this other crystal feels it or something.
Well, the changes are downloaded to all things that arise from that template.
Oh, okay. So you're saying there's also kind of like a source of the templates or something like that, or a template controller or something.
The template is the source.
The template is the source. Okay. And we're instances of the template, right?
Yeah. Like that. But it's like the 100th monkey effect kind of a thing, or the stories about how like monkeys learn to stick, twigs into tree branches to get the maggots or whatever, get the termites off of the end of the stick. And then like monkeys on a whole another island start doing it like a day later, that kind of thing. Like there's no way those monkeys could have learned that trick.
Like in Space Odyssey, where one monkey figures out that it's like, I can pick up the bone and hit stuff. And then all the monkeys are like, hey, we pick up the bone and hit stuff.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's the idea. So that there's like this operating template, right? That's not physical. It's somewhere in the background. We can't sense it or touch it or measure it, but there's something there. And so there's this human template, just like a mosquito template and a monkey template.
Okay. And the last thing you said was that this template gets upgraded.
I'm saying that's what COVID was an upgrade to this template. Yeah.
All right. And you're suggesting that all the instances of the template need to cast off latent repressed trauma, cleanse it to come into alignment with the new template?
Yeah.
With the upgraded template?
Right. They need to resonate with the upgraded template. That's right.
Right. So they've been, even another way of saying this would be like that some people were lagging behind a shift in collective consciousness, or is that kind of like a metaphor for that?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, you could kind of. I mean, it's not. You're not going off on the wrong direction. It's more like that they're carrying something with them that does not resonate with the new template.
Okay.
And it's sure. repressed trauma of some sort.
Okay.
Rejected feelings, as Yeshua would say, right? They've rejected these feelings that they don't want to remember or feel, so that goes into the body. You know that, right? Better than most anybody.
Are you going to say now? They talk about the specific upgrade in the template, or is that coming later? Or
but the upgrade is light. In effect, it's just lighting up these dark spots, and essentially, attempting to gracefully remove them. And when I get to the end here, you'll see what I mean by what I'm saying there. But in effect, it was a way to not have to deal with your emotional problem if you could gracefully ride through these light upgrades. So in other words, you didn't have to do the shadow work on these. Like you've had to do, obviously, a bunch of this with your fibromyalgia and your back pain miracle stuff, right? You're focused on the body part, and the trauma and the emotion rose up and you let it flow and all that kind of stuff. So all that kind of work that you've done over the past few years, you could essentially bypass if you could just learn to kind of go easy and flow in your life.
Sure.
And if you could do that, then you wouldn't, quote, get COVID. But if your life was just rammed with activities and action and commitments and agendas, and you just, busy, either, entertainment, partying, hanging out, just from dawn till dusk, your life is filled with activities. You weren't getting any slow time or downtime into your life, then you're more likely to, quote, get COVID, because you couldn't take this template upgrade gracefully.
Even more so than, well, perhaps not more so, but something else other than activities would just be a constant, like being stuck in thought. Yeah.
That would do it too. Yeah. It's the busyness factor plays a huge role in getting or avoiding what we call COVID.
Okay. So are you suggesting that the template had a sudden upgrade, or it was constantly upgrading for a long period of time, and during that period of time, and during that period of long time period, these people were missing out on sticking with the template upgrade and upgrading their consciousness, let's say, or selves.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it.
And then suddenly it's like the universe doesn't allow that anymore, and it's like, boom. Well, if you're not going to come with it, then it's just going to be kicked out of you.
Right. That's it. It's a cumulative upgrade. It started happening in 2017, 2018, and it's happening right now. So they're like waves. There's like waves of it that come and they pull back, and they come and they pull back. So it's never stopped. Right. It's been more intense in certain areas, or we reached a point in 2020 where, right, it triggered more people than normal. But I know a lot of people in my family and a few friends thought they had COVID, like in the fall and even summer and fall of 2019. I know 4 or 5 people that could have sworn they had it long before there was such a name for it, but they had the weird flu-like things and they were bedridden and energy drained. And so you can see that it was kicking off, but obviously it reached the maximum number of people in 2020, 2021. And of course the media hype and everything else didn't help at all. But yeah, those were some of the stronger upgrades and that were happening. And I think we're stepping into another one right now as we do this podcast.
Okay. Well, how does this explain how there's concentrated timings of people having this at the same time?
What do you mean?
Well, if you look at the like a graph of when did people get COVID, it's like, oh, in this particular month, or these 3 months here, there was a huge surge and lots of people got it here. But then in the next few months, not so many people got it.
Well, that's all garbage medical and government stats that they got the surges.
Garbage?
Oh, 100%. Right. It's all garbage. When they want a surge, they got a surge, right? They
right.
Turned up the PCR tests and, did more fear mongering, and, the hospitals were incentivized to get COVID patients. I mean, the whole thing is artificial.
Okay.
Right. I personally never saw a surge in it, and I saw a pretty even distribution. But I mean, if in fact there is some truth to that, and I don't think anybody will ever know, but if in fact there really was, then you could just say that there were times when the template upgrade was a little too much to handle for a lot of people. And that would be an example of a wave coming in, and that wave, crashed a little too high up on the sand, and got your towel wet, and got your clothes wet. You weren't ready for it, and then it pulled back after that. Make sense?
Okay. So
cool.
I see next we've got this Prentice Mulford content.
Yeah.
Did you want me to read that?
I would. You've got a great voice, so please, if you wouldn't mind, give voice to one of my favorite authors, Mr. Mulford.
Do you want to just quickly mention who Prentice Mulford is?
he's just kind of really, he was just a guy who woke up to, let's call it, metaphysical truths completely on his own without any training. He was not religious. He wasn't spiritual. He never used any dogma. I mean, he understood, some stuff from Jesus and Christianity, but he was just a guy who started writing. He was a journalist and an author, living, I think he lived in San Francisco and also in Long Island. And he just, his first book was called Thoughts Are Things, which is an amazing book. But then after that, he came out with the 5-volume Your Forces and How to Use Them. And it's just raw, common sense, practical advice and guidance on watching what you're thinking and feeling. And it's really what it comes down to. And he's saying that all your problems, all the issues in your world stem from these things. And obviously in this one comes from volume 5, the chapter called Thought Currents. Good?
All right. Here we go.
Let her rip.
So the thought current of fear is everywhere. All humanity fears something: disease, death, loss of fortune, loss of friends, loss of something. Everyone has his or her pet fear. It extends to the most trivial details of life. The streets are full of people who, if fearing nothing else, fear they won't catch a train or the next streetcar. The more sensitive you are to the impress of thought, the more liable are you to be affected by this thought current of fear, until your spirit, by constant demand of the supreme power, builds up for itself an armor of thought positive to this current and which will deny it access. You can commence this building in saying, whenever you are affected in the way above mentioned or in any disagreeable fashion, I refuse to accept this thought and the mental condition it has brought on me, which affects my body. You commence then to turn aside the thought current of evil. Place yourself in a house where there has recently been a panic or scare, though you may know nothing of it. You were well and strong the day before. You will rise in the morning, and soon this whole train of disagreeable sensations affects you, because the house or place is saturated with a thought current of fear. If I can just mention, like, I'm living in Russia right now, and when I step into my building, these are like probably old Soviet building. As soon as I step into the very first, just go in the door, I'm like, oh, I feel like I can feel the weight of communism like upon me. Like
I
the whole
believe it.
stack of the building just going. I'm like, it's different in here. Okay,
100%.
So put a fear on city, town, or country of some deadly epidemic or some great calamity, and hundreds of the more sensitive who may have no fear of that epidemic or calamity are still affected by it disagreeably. That thought current affects them in their particular weak spot. A fanatic predicts some great catastrophe. The sensational newspapers take up the topic, ventilate it, affect to ridicule. The sensational newspapers take up the topic, ventilate it, affect to ridicule, but still write about it. This sets more minds to thinking and more people to talking. The more talk, the more of this injurious force is generated. As a result, thousands of people are affected by it unpleasantly, some in one way, some in another, because the whole force of that volume of fear is let loose upon them. Some are killed outright. Entirely unaware of the cause, they open their minds more and more to it, dwell on it in secret, put out no resisting thought, until at last the spirit, unable longer to carry such a load, snaps the link which connects it with the body.
Boom.
I tell you, this 1800 stuff is a bit hard to read.
Yeah, he writes in a little different fashion. But this was 1891, folks, just for anybody who wanted to know when that was penned. Sorry, 1881. But he is suggesting what some of the things I talked about in our disease podcasts, what Dr. Hammer talked about, in that there is this energy, and this goes to my resonance idea that we dove in pretty deeply with Rupert Sheldrake, right? So you fall into resonance with the thought current, the thought streams that are flowing in your orbit. So that's your family, your friends, your coworkers, your neighborhood, your town, your city. Right? If you're not, he says it in there, if you're not consciously rejecting that thought stream, then you're affected by it. You have to you have to counter it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing we talked about the other night, right? And I don't know if this is right, but I say this is my thing. I thought this up, so I don't know if it's right. So, nobody quote me on this, but my thought was that if you don't have a thought opposed to the dominant thought, you automatically take on the thoughts that everybody else is thinking and believing.
Right. You're impressionable.
It just happens, right? You don't have any thought about it. You just take it on, whatever everybody thinks about it. The example I always give is the Eiffel Tower. If you've never been to it before and you just show up for the Eiffel Tower, you're like, oh, it's amazing. And the Freemasons built it in 1742 and whatever. It's this high, and you take on all the popular beliefs of it without even making an effort to counter them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's again, I don't know if that's right. I've never heard anybody say that, but that's kind of goes along with what he's saying here, right? You don't even have to know that people had a disagreeable situation in the house you're in for you to be affected by those thoughts and feelings that everybody else is putting out.
So you're suggesting that, let's say you didn't even watch the news, you didn't even know about a pandemic, but you live in a place where everyone else is knowing about a pandemic and they're like, oh, we're gonna get sick, everyone's gonna get sick. And let's say you don't have like a resilient mind or a resilient thought current or whatever you want to call it of your own, then this external thought current just invades you. And if you just allow it in, it just kind of like takes over and you're like, oh, I don't feel good. Oh,
yeah.
It's
exactly what he said, right? He called it disagreeable sensations, right? So it depends on your fragility, your sensitivity, right? Like, so an empath, a person who's an empath is likely to really take it hard and heavy, right? But a person who's more guarded in their emotions and a little bit more aware is going to be, maybe they just, don't feel well or get tired early or something like that. But yeah, we're enmeshed in this astral realm, like it or not, right? Where all the thoughts are flowing. We're inside of those. Right? Your only way out. Have you ever climbed a tall mountain? I don't know if I've ever told you this before. Have you ever gone mountain climbing?
What do you call tall?
I got to do it in meters now here. 3,000 meters or higher.
No, I've been at that elevation
in
a plane. Kazakhstan.
Oh, okay.
In Kazakhstan.
Okay. Well, according to metaphysical teachers, the thought streams are below 8,000 feet, 3,000 meters, roughly 2,500 meters. So if you've ever climbed a mountain, I've been up pretty high a few times, 10, 11, 12,000 feet. There's this remarkable peace. That's why people love it. John Denver, Rocky Mountain High, right? That you feel great when you're up there, even though the oxygen's a little low. There's this real sense of peace, and it's because you're not immersed in this astral realm.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of above all this negative, disagreeable thought current that's flowing around you. Make sense?
Yeah, relatable as well. I mean, I don't know, but like I at least can feel it, like from anyone, like one person. I can feel like, whoa, I can feel this aura from a group, from a single person, like all the time.
Yeah, you're a little bit of an empath. Maybe you're a lot of an empath. Women are more likely to be empaths, but there are plenty of men that are too. And you have that. That's when you walk into your Soviet building, you pick up on it. So your etheric body is a little more open, shall we say? It's a little less guarded. That's what an empath is they pick up on the feelings of other people. The problems for the empaths is they can't tell that it's other people's emotions, right? They kind of take it on and own it.
Okay.
Anyway.
So are you suggesting, are you, can we synergize this Mulford material with this template idea?
Well, I think that that's one of the things that's happening, right? Of this 50% that I'm talking about, right? Are these people that are falling into line with the the main thought currents that are flowing around them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would tend to think these people get more of the flu-like type symptoms rather than the trauma release, which is what I'm about to talk about here next. So
Okay.
I
might add in
can't.
something though.
Go ahead.
Well, um, so there was the whole Trump "Make America Great Again" movement, and anyone listening doesn't need to think I'm either a supporter or non-supporter, or I'm removed from this kind of stuff. Like, I'm not for or against any particular political party or anything like that. Uh, there seemed to be this upgrade in this positivity. People wanted to in that movement. People wanted, and it was spread all across the world. There was this. It was a freedom movement. It was an independence movement. It was a rebellion against being controlled, being under the thumb, slavery,
Mm-hmm.
uh, groupthink, being a sheep. It seemed to be some sort of template upgrade associated with that, and humanity in a way was kind of like that could have been reflective of this upgrade in humanity that's happening. And some people didn't want to go with it. They
Right.
were like resisting that, and eventually the rubber bands snapped, and they're like, whoop.
Right. Yeah. That's a good observation, and I would call that more of a veil removal. So that's a definite consciousness lifting, right? A rise in consciousness, which is part of the template upgrade. So it's not apart from it. That's a different, right? The template I'm talking about, the physical body template at this point, right? The thing behind the physical body. But what you're talking about is more of a consciousness type of thing, which absolutely has been ongoing for a good 5 or 6 years. Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. So
Okay.
yeah. So again, I it's not going to be possible for me to say this person had this variety and that person had that variety, but I'll sum it up here in a second. But I wanted to make this quick point. We're going to do a podcast next or two away here on epidemics and pandemics. I've got Spanish flu and smallpox and black plague and polio and so forth. But there is this, right? There is this thing that Mulford talked about, this thought current that gets going and it drives people into great states of fear. And most of these have some, relation to fear-based things happening and the cause of these so-called epidemics. But I'll get into that in greater detail in a different podcast. So where are we at here? So I'm next going to bring up channeled materials, and I know some people turn their noses up at this, but I put a lot of stock in this information, and I listen carefully. I'm a discerning listener, and when a lot of different channeled resources start talking about the same thing and getting on the same page, I tend to listen a little bit more. And we kind of already mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but what they've been suggesting for quite a while now, probably 10 years, but really as of 2019, really talking about these continual waves or infusions of light happening across the planet. And they're saying, with that light, it exposes the dark. And I think most people listening to our podcasts can at least agree that we're seeing more institutional deception, lies, and corruption are starting to show up, right? If you're looking for it, it's not hard to find now. Obviously, the mainstream media is hiding it as best they can because they're part of it. But you can see more and more people waking up to just how much darkness we've been enveloped in for all our lives. And it's that darkness that we're seeing out there in, being revealed in the world about us that's also being revealed or released in our bodies. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. So when you say infusion of light, what do you mean? Light. What do you mean light?
Well, all right. So I'll have to go a little deeper here. It's a good question. So if you go to the highest metaphysical sources, they'll say that everything is light. There's nothing that isn't light, right? If you think about it, if there was no light, I couldn't see you, could I? If we were in a dark room together, I couldn't see you, right?
No.
But if I bounce light off of you, then I can see you. So what am I seeing you, or am I seeing light reflecting off of you? Which one is it?
Well, the way you're asking the question, you already said everything is light, but then you're saying, am I bouncing light off you? So the way you're referring to it is separating me from light. So what are you,
In a way,
what,
in a way, yeah.
what are you
But it's
getting at?
light, yeah, it's light bouncing off of light in effect. But because we are immersed in this 3D realm, density, we call it third density, right? This density is half light and half dark. And dark isn't
Okay.
real. What they say is darkness isn't real. It's just the absence of light. And so,
Sure. I
the,
read that in Terry Pratchett so long ago when he introduced me to the word privative.
oh, okay, there you go. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's all it is that just the caverns and cracks and crevices that of the world where the dark actors could hide, and suddenly, sunlight shining on them, so they're being exposed. And where they used to be able to hide, they can't hide anymore. There's too much light. And the same goes for our bodies, where we were hiding our traumas or repressed emotions. Those are being exposed, and they just have to go away. They don't fit with the template any longer. So they have to be released.
Mm-hmm.
That help?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So you're using this word light in are you using it are you using it in a metaphysical way, in a spiritual way, or
Always. Right. So, I mean, most light we can't see anyway, right? The visible spectrum of light is this tiny little band on the entire spectrum of light, right?
mm-hmm.
So
um So
that's why,
are you suggesting that there's like visible light? And you know, when people talk about non-visible light, they're like, oh, infrared, right? But are you suggesting even beyond any of these like wavelengths that are measured on the spectrum in nanometers or whatever, you know, that's scientifically analyzed? Are you suggesting that there's like even further spiritual
yeah,
metaphysical light?
yeah,
Okay.
both. But it's enough to know that, right? You've got your spectrum of light, right? Your ultraviolet, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other end, and the like, if you look at the light spectrum, like the visible light's like right there in the middle. It's this tiny little band, right? Like there's so much more
Mm-hmm.
that encompasses light. So we can perceive with our eyes just a fraction of it, and you could obviously go much further with the metaphysical aspects of things. But that's all it is that this earth was sunk into duality effectively, so equal amounts of light and dark. And now, as we proceed forward, we're no longer vibrating in equal amounts of light and dark. There's now more light than there is dark. So there's an imbalance in the duality. Yeah.
Okay.
So the channels suggest. They also suggest, by the way, that all the top people who run this world know full well what's going on. Obviously, they're not letting any of us know any of it. They've known this for 15, 20 years. That's an interesting little side note there.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, so I mentioned 4 and 5 here, right? That this is, the light that's exposing the darkness in our institutions is also exposing it in our bodies, and that these waves are going to continue
Right.
into the foreseeable future. So there's no end to quote unquote COVID, right? Potentially experiencing these symptoms, which, the one symptom that everybody experiences is the big energy drain, lethargy. So what do they suggest? How do you avoid getting COVID, right? So they say, the number one thing on the list is get a good night's sleep. That should be your top priority. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, you're going to have a lot of problems. So the next thing they say is that you need to have periods in your waking hours of relaxation, downtime, quiet time, meditation, silent sitting, sitting on your porch, just looking at the birds, right? No thinking, no video games, no TV, just complete downtime. And that's helping the light. That's helping you basically come into synchronization with the template. So that's gently pushing out the darkness for you. So you're basically giving you an opportunity to gracefully uptake the light and expel whatever dark you're carrying around in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I do this whole podcast just to say this piece. Even if you don't believe a word that I said, which many people will not when first hearing it, everybody can attempt or really take this guidance, into consideration and try to get a good night's sleep, try to relax, try to find downtime, try to slow down their life. They say that effectively, that's what COVID really was to slow everything down, slow everybody down.
And it did.
It did indeed, and bring us more present, right? Because when you're sick, you're very present, right? When you're sick, you can't do anything else except be present with feeling sick, right? So you do become very present. So they're pushing us towards presence. So, and I just had a note here, Brad and Matt's experience, and we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, but I've got a pretty regular meditation practice and a pretty chilled out lifestyle. So this has been very, very easy for me in this period. And of course, I haven't had COVID or any sicknesses for several decades. So that's been nice. And Matt, you could talk a little bit about your fibromyalgia and everything, but you've spent a lot of time being present with your body these past few years, right?
Yeah, well, up until I guess about 2016, probably. Yeah, 2016. Yeah, I had terrible body pain. Oh. And then it just suddenly in one instant began to release when I recognized the link between the pain and just repressed emotions, which is obvious afterwards. Like if you're aware of that, it's like, yeah, duh.
Right.
But most people who are still in chronic pain believe that it's a purely physical condition. And they're running around trying to use purely physical approaches to solve it. So after I discovered it was emotional things, I developed movements, slow, gentle style of movement, let's say, where you actually can focus deeply on areas of the body, which just focus in on the, fears, emotions, and just general life sentiments that are just trapped in you and repressed, and it just consistently releases them. And over the next few years, well, I wouldn't say all, but like so much of that lifted off me. And I would say at the same time, like not just physical pains like that, but like allergies went away, and just what a physicalist would call the immune system improved to the point where I'm like, get sick, like, man, like when COVID came around, because I'd done all that, I was like, COVID. Ooh, I'm gonna get sick. Like I was like, I doubt it.
Exactly.
If you do all this meditation stuff and take all this time to, relax yourself and get all this nonsense gunk out of your body and mind, then you reach, you get that high immune system state of being.
Right. You return to your natural state, which is perfect health.
Right. Yeah. Like you're not meant to be able to get sick.
Right.
Right. Like your life isn't meant to, like a lot of people live life in this way where they just decline from their 20s into more and more sickness until death. Right. Like, no, it's not. That is unnatural.
Completely. But it seems normal in our crazy world we've been indoctrinated into, right? It seems to be the norm. Like how many people over 50 aren't taking prescription meds, right? I think the average is 2 or over 50 in America. But what your whole program, Back Pain Miracle, is really, it's a body awareness, and it's mind too, but you're becoming aware of the body, which is presence. And that's effectively what relaxation, downtime, quiet time, meditation is. It's presence. And it's in that presence that your template, that your body's able to more gracefully release. And most everybody's got, they're holding on to traumas and stored things in their bodies. And it's a common situation. It's not rare. So, my summary here was that, I've unleashed some pretty radical information probably to most people's ears, but really what this comes down to is beliefs, right? Like because everybody in the world believes in viruses, right? Because that's what they were taught. but nobody's ever seen one, or pictures on the internet aren't viruses. So you're believing in them, and obviously, masking and disinfecting and cleaning and washing and avoiding hugging and getting vaccinations and taking hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin is still you still get COVID, right? So none of that, people can argue, it works for you for most people, right? Even all these attempts to avoid it, you still get it. Why not consider what's been shared here today and consider believing what I've said instead? It's not going to hurt you. You can still mask and jab and disinfect and do all of that, but do the relaxation and the good sleep and inactivity. Walk, get some sunlight in your eyes, and go walk in nature and so forth. And maybe that'll do you some good. What do you think?
Well, stop rushing about your life and stop being so concerned about everything.
Yeah, if you can eliminate worry from your mindset, then you're off to the races. No question about it. But most people who have busy, hectic, active lifestyles are in a near constant state of worry, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, some of my friends say, "Oh, I'm so busy." I'm like, "What are you talking about?
Hey,
What do you mean?
I gotta get to
Oh,
this.
you're so busy. What are you so busy with?"
Yeah. You can make your life as busy or as unbusy as you choose. And what the channels are suggesting is it's time to unbusify yourself. So there you have it. COVID, colds, flus, and fevers. What do you think, Matt?
I think it's interesting. If I can add one last thing, you said unbusy yourself. I think this has happened in the scientific realm as well, in
Yeah.
the in industrial realm, in the engineering realm, because I've noticed that since the AI tools have come out, you know, my view of my work is shifting from I am going to be able to produce and create so much with the click of a button
Yeah.
without working, right? And I think that's where humanity is moving. Like we're going to all be able to manifest that which we desire through science and engineering, even by the click of by just coming up with an idea and just wishing it and clicking and it gets created.
Yeah, that's
And
probably
we'll have to let go of
yeah.
believing that we need to work.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that all that AI and tools are a bridge to even higher levels of manifestation, which someday we'll
Yeah.
talk about in greater detail. But yeah, absolutely, that's a good point. And well, I was going to say that the channels also often talk about generations, least of all mine, most often yours. But they're saying the millennials rejecting the 9 to 5 work week like you have,
Right.
and
Right.
the Zoomers are even less resonant with it. So they just doesn't even. There was a video of a girl that went viral that had just graduated college, and she had to take the train into her work, and she couldn't afford to live in Manhattan, but that's where she worked, and it was an hour train in and an hour train out, and she was doing her little TikTok video, and she was really a sweet girl, but it just went viral. But she's like, I've been working this job for 2 months, and I don't have time to do anything else, and I can't hang out with my friends, and I don't feel like doing anything when I get home, and
Oh
basically
yeah.
started crying. But she was kind of, I think, a good representative of that Zoomer age, generation, that they're not going to accept the 9 to 5 work week. They're like hardwired not to accept it. So should cause some interesting disruptions in the workforce in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anyway,
Do you want to
excellent.
mention how Take Your Power Back is such a fantastic tool to uh, help people move beyond the COVID state of mind?
Yeah, that's what it is. That step one is not believing the lies you've been told. That's one of the many things that come through here. But it's really saying, I'm responsible for my life, and these things out here that the institutions are trying to scare me with have little or nothing to do with my world. So that's a big part of it. It's taking back responsibility, dumping that victim mentality, and really taking control of your life is what it's all about. And it's experiential. We've got way too much information in our heads. We need to get rid of all the information. And the more we free ourselves from this information, the more control we'll get, the happier we'll be. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Did you want to broach the idea of these power leaks that you've been thinking about?
Well, so yeah, so and that'll be in the free mini course that we're going to be putting out here in the next month or two here, and but that's going to be kind of the introduction to show how your power is leaking through behaviors you've been taught are normal, but are in fact very detrimental to your life. So the example the first example I give is how you react to somebody that you don't like, and you accuse them of making you feel bad, but in fact you yourself chose how you felt after seeing this person or listening to this person. So that's exercise 1 in the power leaks, and there'll be quite a few more after that. Show you that you can actually take back your power and not let these external stimuli take you down, as it were. You won't be
Sure.
likely to be
You
caught up
continue.
in these negative thought currents. Go ahead.
Well, you could say that there are two ways to live: disempowered or empowered. And if you leak your power, you become disempowered. And if you become disempowered, you're in the path to COVID.
There you go. Yeah.
So
Once you become,
you
yeah,
don't you want to not leak power, and you want to empower yourself. So
that's right.
and if you want that way, then take your power back.
There
I
you
think
go.
take your power back might be the cure for COVID, Brad. Is that possible?
It's a cure for almost every problem that ails you if you take the course on head on and do the exercises and commit to it. Then there isn't much that it can't help people resolve.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. COVID, a minor detail in the grand scheme of things, but yes, COVID, absolutely.
Right. Well, that's available on our website, themindblownzone.com. And also on the courses page, you can find the back pain miracle that we mentioned. And we also have an awesome one called conscious eating, which is great for solving diseases that you associate with food and also helping with weight loss as well.
Awesome. All right.
Okie dokie.
Thanks everybody for
Thanks a lot,
tuning
Brett.
in. This ran a little longer than I expected, but it was worth it to get this out there so that from here on out, I can point people to my COVID podcast so I don't have to sit them down and try to explain all this in a 10-minute conversation. It'll be much nicer. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We look forward to your comments, feedback, questions, and obviously we'll follow up as need be. And thank you, Matt, for being, as always, the inquisitive, smart guy who has the truth radar and sensors and keeps me on track. You did a good job on this one. Really appreciate it.
Well, okay. Well, you're welcome. And thank you for the information.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. I think we're going to be doing chicken pox is our next one. Smallpox and measles and rubella and mumps. So hope everybody tunes in for the next one. That is the hard one to explain for most people.
Okay. Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.